Hey, Jack, thanks for reaching out and sharing your message with me and inviting me to do a video response so that I could share these responses with other men who are undoubtedly experiencing the same things. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to respond to your message in chunks. That way, I can put it in an article where I share a little bit about the written form of your message and then respond to a piece at a time. It's a lot more beneficial for me and probably for you also if I can just make a series of shorter videos. So I'm going to start by reading a block of your message to me, and then I'll talk through just what comes up for me when I do that. So here's the first one. You start out saying, I need direction, assurance, and perhaps I was looking for you to talk me down from a, quote, ledge. I was poised to take the position in a conversation with Amy as, if we aren't lovers, then I don't want to be in a relationship. It all goes. You got out of this trap. I want to too. And so that's how you start your message. And you're right. I did get out of this trap. I got out of it after 20 some odd years of marriage where I felt just like you do. And so I'm very familiar with how it feels to be living in a marriage that is just really not satisfying, not happy, not checking the boxes you wanted to check, and just longing for a better life. I totally understand that well. I've shared that with a lot of men, just my own journey through that space and how I overcame it. And then just for some context, a lot of men I started to share what worked for me started to follow kind of some of the same things, and lo and behold, they experienced the same results. And it started to become apparent to myself and to the men I was working with, there are some really reliable patterns to this that I had accidentally discovered, so much so that I quit my 25-year IT career, and now what I do is talk to men like you about this. So here's what comes up for me in this first little bit that you mentioned. First of all, this is a pervasive problem. Lots of men daydream and fantasize and even come right to the edge of having that conversation that you're daydreaming about having. That conversation where you just lay it all out and say, look, this is how I want it to be. It's not going that way. And so if it doesn't shape up soon, it's over. I'm done. There are actually some good things stirring in a man's heart that are leading him to this place. It's really important for a man to come to the place where he has to see a change or he's out. I love that part of this. It was a crucial part for me too, to come to a place where what was not going to be an option was maintaining the status quo that I had experienced for 20 years. And so I'm really thrilled to see you come to that place. However, the solution that I've got to tell her is evidence in you, and like it was for me, that you believe that the answers to the life that you want, that the path to the life you want is found through her, and specifically through changes in her. And that is why you're miserable. That's why I was miserable. That's why hundreds of guys I talk to a year are miserable, because it's never empowering as a man to live in a story where the life and future you want and the present you want is not in your power and control to have. The moment we live in a story where someone else owns the keys to that is the moment that suffering begins. And so it's evident to me, just in your statement, I'm thinking about having this conversation with her and the things that follow, that's what you're caught up in. You're caught up in a story where Amy controls the future and the present, access to your happiness, your sense of fullness, and your sense of well-being. If Amy controls this and owns it, you, my friend, do not. And having a conversation about your future, when you don't own your future, is no more empowering than your day-to-day issues that you come up with, because disempowerment is disempowerment. When you're talking to a woman and having this kind of ultimatum conversation, but you don't own yourself, you're no more empowered having had the conversation. In fact, you'll find out, like a lot of men do, you have that conversation, your bluff gets called, and you're still as stuck as ever because you don't own yourself. And that's where the opportunity exists to move into some great space, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the videos to follow. The other thing I've noticed, and I've talked to a lot of guys all over the gamut with this, men who have been divorced and remarried, men who've been divorced and remarried several times, men who've had this conversation and whatnot. I'm not saying it never turns out, but we know from divorce statistics that the majority of first divorces, a healthy majority, get divorced the second time. And by the time you get married your third time, your chances of divorce are somewhere around 83 or 86%. And so clearly a strategy of letting go of one relationship by feeling like this is not a path that people are finding that leads to a secure, stable, long-term, fulfilling relationship. It just doesn't. You can't support that idea in the stats. But it's also been my experience talking to a lot of men that men do that and they have an immediate reprieve. They feel a great sense of relief right away. Kind of like if you're in grad school on the first day and somebody says, hey, you want to go back to the 6th grade? If you went back there, man, you would absolutely kill it as a 6th grader who had been through high school and college. You would dominate for a while. You'd feel like, man, I am on top. I am the alpha dog in the 6th grade. The problem is you're operating at a really low bar. So yeah, of course you feel great. And that happens in a new relationship. Everybody tends to excel in most new relationships, especially men or women who have left a relationship they're unhappy with, because there's no baggage in a new relationship. It hasn't formed yet. It's easy. And so out of all of the stages of a long-term relationship, the easiest two are the beginning two. Maybe you could say the easiest, even easier than that to a degree, is the very last one, but that's a different matter. And so judging, hey, yeah, I made the right decision. This is what happens. Guys, they exit a long-term relationship in the disillusionment or power struggle stage. They go start a new one, and most of those guys start one within 6 months to a year because they do not know how to be comfortable alone. And so they create a new relationship. They find a woman. They're just thrilled to bits. They go live the way that they had longed to live. They take the European vacation. They buy new clothes. They start working out. And they're like, man, I've got a whole new life. I experienced transformation. But then the same stuff that ruined their first relationship comes up, and they're no more equipped to deal with it because they live in an external story where what they want comes to them from outside, from her. And so they start in the same patterns again. Those same patterns start to ruin that relationship. But by the time this happens, now they're 15, 20 years into a second relationship. And because their first relationship usually ends late 30s to their 40s, now they're approaching 70 years old and they're feeling a tremendous amount of pressure, like, oh no, I really have no time to now end my second relationship, start a third, and hope I get this right. And so what you end up having is men that perpetually know how to start a relationship, but have no idea how to finish one. As a metaphor, and again, I have no critique for people that get divorced, nor am I against divorce. I just want you to understand what talking to the majority of people is like, that they all kind of come to the same conclusions. Imagine for a moment, as a metaphor, you want to learn to fly an airplane, and so you buy an airplane, you take lessons, and you're kind of cleared to go ahead and fly by yourself. And so you fly by yourself, and you get up, and you're soaring, and you feel great, and your airplane stalls, and you do not feel like you can make it work. And so you jettison out, maybe you parachute out, your plane crashes, boom, right? Okay, you don't know how to land. You've never landed the airplane. You've learned to fly and whatnot, but you haven't gained the skills to recover from an engine stall on your own. And so you work hard, you buy a second airplane. and you take off on the first day with that, and man, shitty circumstances, you get in a second stall or scenario. You don't know how to address it. You don't know how to recover from it. You go into a nosedive, you bail out, and you crash a second airplane. Okay, well, you're a pilot, yes, but you don't have the full gamut of the pilot experience, because you know how to take off an airplane, but you don't know how to land one. And I would suggest a lot of people approach marriage the same way. They know how to take off, they know how to get to the trouble spot, that place where the engine stalls or an engine catches on fire or whatnot. And there are two paths you can go. You can learn to be the man that recovers that. And I guarantee you, if this is on YouTube, tons of men will watch this and get angry, saying, but yes, some of them can't be recovered if she does this or she does that. I don't have time for guys like that, because they live in a victim state. I'm talking to you, Jack, because I know you're not that kind of man. I know you're the kind of man that knows you have it within yourself to turn around anything that comes up in your life. Now, it doesn't mean there are legitimate reasons for the plane to crash, but we're talking about the scenario where a man has just handed over the controls. He's scared, is what it's really about. He doesn't trust himself. He doesn't know that he can create the life he wants. Just like the guy who's flying that airplane, he can actually recover from the stall or from the burned out engine. He just doesn't know it, and in his panic, he just decides to crash the airplane, to just give up and try again. And that's how a lot of people respond to the crisis part of marriage. And every marriage will have, at some point, this crisis that feels exactly like you're describing. And so I just want you to be sober about this, that this is not an abnormal experience, that everybody will experience this, and you absolutely can recover it. Now, do I know positively it'll be with this woman, that there's 100% possibility that it'll work? No, and I'm not saying that, but people always accuse me of that. I'm simply saying you have to become the guy who is willing and learns the skills to turn it around, to actually be the guy that lets it go, because otherwise you're most likely succumbing to a lack of self-trust, blame, victimization, and a set of beliefs that everything is her. And what we find is when men fix those, when they fix those attitudes and behaviors and mindsets, that 9 times out of 10, it turns the marriage around and creates exactly what they wanted. And if not, and the 1 time out of 10 it doesn't, now they're making a decision from a place of calm, confident clarity. They'll feel good exiting that marriage knowing, you know what? I like who I am. I like who she is. I just don't want to be together with her. And here are my values-based reasons why. And it has nothing to do with feeling hurt feelings towards her. It has everything to do with going in the direction of your authentic truth and your value system. That is the best way to leave a marriage. And we'll talk about that more in another video here coming up. Lastly, it's this idea that you've given your power away, that you're living in a story where Amy controls your future. She controls what the relationship looks like, which has actually led to the relationship you don't like, right? Because when you take your hands off of the stick of the airplane that you're flying called marriage, you're not going to like how your partner flies it, because there are roles, despite political correctness and whatnot. Men enjoy leading the relationship. They feel their best when they're leading. Now, I do not mean in charge. Leading is not being in charge. Leading is about going first, doing the hard things first, doing the things nobody else wants to do, going first saying, I'm sorry, going first in looking inwardly at yourself and saying, I need growth, I need change. That is what I'm talking about. To lead the relationship means that you're the first one to move into the uncomfortable, hard places that are necessary for that relationship to heal. And when a man does that and he's doing the hard stuff, he's the one that is pressing forward and into. The woman in the relationship generally, again, despite her political ideology, appreciates that. She wants to be with a man who doesn't see her as controlling his future, but who sees himself as controlling the future. And so this is kind of part of the paradox of what you're experiencing, is the same attitudes that are and mindsets that are leading you to think I have to blow my marriage up are actually the same attitudes and mindsets that are making your marriage suck. And so what I want to encourage you to do before you nuke your family, give up half your assets, see your wonderful children half the time, is let's talk about fixing those mindsets, turning them into a much more fruitful and effective way to live as a man, married or not, and see what happens. And if you don't like how your marriage is from that place, I guarantee you'll feel at peace about ending your marriage if you need to do it. But again, 9 times out of 10, when we've helped a man do that, he realizes these were the things. I'm not to blame for my marriage, but I am responsible. And when I take that power and ownership and responsibility back, and I stop blaming my partner, I stop feeling like a victim, and I start showing up as the hero in my own story, my life turned around. And I'm so glad it did, because I was about to sink the whole thing. I was about to throw everything away under this false belief that my wife was screwing my life up. And so let's keep talking about that in the videos to follow. Stay tuned, and I'll be back in a minute. See ya.